Okay, Jude Scott, Bureau of Meteorology. Tropical Cyclone Narelle is currently at Category 2 strength and around 950 kilometres east of the far North Queensland coast. Now, during tomorrow, the system will continue to move steadily west, intensifying to a Category 5 system during Thursday, and then likely to cross between the Lockhart River and Port Douglas in Queensland on Friday morning. Now, during Friday, it will weaken as it interacts with the land on the Cape York Peninsula, but then the system will move in over the warm waters of the Gulf of Carpentaria, where during Saturday it is expected to re-intensify to cyclone strength. It will then move towards the NT coast in the Gulf of Carpentaria, and communities likely to see impacts from the cyclone include Groote Island, Numbulwar and Nooka, and those impacts are expected from later on Saturday. Now, during Sunday, after the system has crossed the coast, it will bring heavy rainfall along its track overland, and that includes areas of the top end impacted by recent rainfall and flooding, including Beswick and Catherine. Now, daily rainfall totals close to the centre of the system are forecast to be in the 150 to 200 millimetre range, and given the already saturated river catchments right across the top end, this rainfall is likely to lead to renewed river rises. We'll be issuing flood watches and warnings in the coming days with more detail of where those impacts will be. The Bureau will issue the first cyclone watch that will include the Northern Territory from tomorrow morning, and that's for the impacts that are expected from Saturday. We're updating our warnings every 6 hours, so you can access all the most current information from the Bureau via our weather app or website. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Kirsten Engels, Incident Controller, Northern Territory Police. So we're looking at our 7th significant event for this wet season, with Cyclone Narelle set to impact the Territory over the weekend as a Category 3. We are asking everyone that might be impacted by this cyclone to begin their preparations now and to take this really seriously. So the team at the Emergency Operations Centre here are heavily planning, but we are relying on the planning that's occurred over the previous months, weeks, years. This is not new to us. It's why we have local emergency committees and local emergency plans. We have a lot of things that we put in place over the year that we enact in times like this. Now, my job as the incident controller is to gather all of the information and to assess that information, and from that to make the critical decisions that I need to make to keep Territorians safe. It's a very dynamic situation. And it's unfolding right now. This includes assessing shelters and other options to keep people safe in their communities. And we will keep you updated as we unfold that information and make those decisions. So I really want to take the time to thank the community for your ongoing support and cooperation. We know that it's starting to get tedious. We know that we've been together a long time now talking about weather, but we really need you to keep your focus going and prepare for what we know is going to strike this weekend. And I also really want to thank the staff and the volunteers who are out there. They're doing it every day. They're getting up, they're turning up, and they're not letting up. And we're going to get through this. We've got another event to face, and we're going to face it together, and we're going to get through it together. So we're going to keep you updated on things such as Secure NT on Facebook, through your local radio stations, newsprint, and of course, really importantly, through our community engagement. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Greg Jarvis, Deputy Chief Officer at Northern Territory Emergency Service. Just like to start by echoing Kirsten's thoughts on our volunteers, our community residents and our staff that are out there working hard. As you know, we've been working since Cyclone Fina, which was Australia's earliest cyclone in November last year, and there hasn't really been a let up since. So just like to acknowledge the community. We know everyone is tired, but we want to take this opportunity to start to prepare for what's coming. We've heard from the BOM that we're expecting high winds and a large amount of rainfall, particularly across those areas which have already been impacted. So while we have a couple of days to prepare, it's a really good opportunity for community residents to start working on their emergency kits particularly for those communities that may have already been impacted, that may have depleted water, food, medication, batteries, torches, all that type of stuff. This is an opportunity to start preparing. It's to take a big deep breath, acknowledge that we're all very tired, and we have been working for a long time, but we have to go again. And unfortunately, this isn't the end of the season either. Just draw everyone's attention back to Secure NT through the BOM for updates. There will be regular warnings issued as we move through the weekend. People need to be aware, particularly in those impacted zones, particularly along the eastern coast of Northern Territory, where your cyclone shelters are, what your cyclone plan is. Refer to Secure NT for things like pets, animals, what can and can't occur. But particularly as we heard, there's a lot of water coming. We're talking about areas that already have swollen rivers. We've seen some fantastic footage last week about rescues. We don't want to see any more of that. As much as it makes great TV, it puts people's lives in danger. So if it's flooded, forget it. Don't be a floodwit. Stay away from those waters. As I said, touching back on your cyclone plans and your shelters, know what you can and can't do. Prepare yourself. Acknowledge we're all very tired. The workers, the staff, the community is very tired, but there's more to go. Thank you.
Can I just ask you, Kirsten, perhaps just to start with, obviously we're used to the communities being evacuated, remote communities, but are you at this stage considering evacuations around Catherine?
At the moment, we're all the information's coming in, and I'm trying to assess it. There's a lot. It's very dynamic. We're looking at things as what shelters we've got in place, what the likely weather impacts and the flooding impacts are in each area, and I'm still making those decisions sort of hour by hour at the moment.
Very much a possibility, though.
To
evacuate Catherine?
That's not on the table right now, but that's not to say that that won't change. But right now, I haven't made any decisions like that.
What about Green Island or those Gulf communities? And if you do need to evacuate people from there, where would they go?
So, like I said, we haven't made any decisions on evacuations right now. We're working through those. We're looking at what shelters are available, what standard they're at, and whether they're able to meet the need that we might need them to meet over the weekend when Narelle hits. So if we did need to move them, if that was a necessity, we would make that happen. But that's not, those decisions haven't been made right now.
Are any additional health staff being sent to those Gulf communities to help with such things like urgent care that might arise during the cyclone?
One of health's primary jobs when it comes to emergency management is to scope out the medically vulnerable people and determine whether they can stay in place or whether they might need to be moved. So they're doing that right now.
What's the biggest priorities for the government and emergency services right now as we get to the impact of the cyclone?
So as the incident controller, I state to my team at least once, if not twice a day, that I have three major priorities, and the first one of them is the preservation of life. The second one is critical infrastructure, and the third is property and being able to undertake the job that we're employed to do. So first is always the preservation of life, and that's for the community and for the responders.
How much pressure is prolonged weather events putting on emergency services?
Oh, look, we'll always do what we have to do. We work 24/7. We always have. We always will. But there's no mistaking that it can be worrying, and we know that we've got interstate assistance in the Emergency Operations Centre, and we do look to our brothers and sisters beyond our own borders sometimes if we have to. But make no mistake, we will keep turning up 24/7, and we will keep dealing with it.
Queensland's preemptively building generators to communities that will be impacted. Is this being considered in Territory?
There's not a thing that's not on the table if we need to do so. We have our people out there assessing our infrastructure and seeing what we might need or what potentially might happen. And we know we've got FINA in the quite recent past, and we know what happened there, and we're paying particular attention to a couple of the things that happened there as far as power and water went, and seeing if we can rectify those things or strengthen them for this time.
Greg spoke of some of the rescues last week. How, in your assessment, how lucky was it that there were no fatalities in last week's incident?
Which particular one are you talking about?
Just the general people driving through flooded waters, the rescues that need to occur. You know, like you get the feeling that it might have just been a matter of luck that someone's life wasn't lost during some of those incidents.
I think there's an awful lot of luck that it happens when somebody drives through flooded waters and gets swept away and clings hold of a tree and has to be rescued by anyone. I think I shudder when I see these things happen, or when I'm given early warning that there is a rescue underway, and I probably don't sleep that well until I know that it's all over. I think there's an amazing expertise by the rescuers, and I think there's great courage shown. But yeah, it's our worst case scenario when there are risks taken. Sometimes, things do happen, but when there's a clear risk that was taken, I'm sure a lot of these people, if you could turn back the clock, they wouldn't have made the decision they made, and we hope they'll learn from it.
Is there any likelihood that those Gulf communities will eventually be evacuated?
We need to keep assessing the information that we've got. It's really dynamic. We only found out about 34U, which turned into Tropical Cyclone Narelle yesterday. So look, I don't want to preempt anything quite yet, but I'm telling you that everything is on the table. The information's coming in thick and fast, and I've got some pretty big decisions to make this afternoon.
What's the best information you have about whether or not it will make a direct hit on Catherine, that being a particular focus given how much flooding is already being there?
That would be a bomb question.
The question again, please.
I'm just wondering, what's the latest advice you have on the tracking and whether it's going to make a direct hit or how close it's going to come to Catherine and those catchment areas for the Catherine River?
So this system is quite unusual in that there's very strong consensus across the guidance models that we use, and we have quite a tight area in terms of the track that we expect the cyclone to follow. So quite sort of typically in a cyclone situation, at sort of 3 days in advance, you'd have quite a broad area of expected rainfall. In this case, we've got quite a tight path of where we expect the rainfall to occur. At this stage, the system, so it's kind of after it does cross the coast, it will weaken to ex-tropical cyclone status, but it still will be bringing heavy rainfall, even sort of not as a tropical cyclone system. So it is, at this stage, expected to pass kind of directly over the Catherine region, and there's every chance that the rainfall there will lead to renewed river rises along the Catherine catchment.
How high are those river rises expected to be? Could we see major flooding in the region again?
At this stage, the expectation is that we'll see moderate flooding levels return to in Catherine. The difference between this system and the previous system is that this one is moving quite fast. So it's a system that's expected to cross the whole of the Northern Territory really within a 24-hour period. And so given it's moving so fast, there's less opportunity for the weather system to stall and produce the heavier falls that can lead to the prolonged and major flooding.
Rather than the forecast from earlier on, you go, mate. Sorry, no, you go.
So when it hits the NT coast, will it be a cyclone or an anti-cyclone?
Yeah, it'll be a cyclone. So it's a cyclone now. It'll be passing over the Cape York Peninsula, where it will weaken. It may still retain cyclone strength as it passes over the Cape York Peninsula. It'll then move over the warm waters of the Gulf of Carpentaria, where it has the opportunity to re-intensify as it's got a new energy source. And so we are expecting it to arrive on, I think, Saturday morning, kind of in the Gulf of Carpentaria, and to spend sort of, roughly the day over the Gulf, kind of re-intensifying. And at this stage, we forecast that it will re-intensify to Category 3 strength.
And also quite a ways ahead, but is there any forecasted impact to Darwin?
Look, we're in the current weather pattern, we're seeing continuing showers and storms right across the top end, but it's not expected that this system will directly impact Darwin. It's more likely to travel kind of at the base of the top end, so kind of pass over and move west without actually taking that hook up further north to reach Darwin.
Any indication of how close it might come to some of those Gulf communities, either on Groote Island or Numbulwar?
Yeah, look, the current track does have the system moving as a Category 3 cyclone over Groote Island. And the impacted communities in terms of the cyclone impacts will be Numbulwar and Nuka, kind of afterwards. That's a little bit further inland.
You mentioned potential downpours of 150, 200 millimetres in 24-hour periods.
Mm-hmm.
Is that mitigated by what you were saying in that answer about the speed of the system, is it?
Mm.
So, I mean, you'd imagine a downpour like that in a 24-hour period would cause monumental flooding in Catherine, but because of the speed, is it less likely to be as damaging as the last one?
It's interesting, and it's a little hard to pick. Look, the Catherine River does have quite a small catchment area, so if the really heavy rainfall does target exactly over the catchment area, then we will see a response to the river height quite fast. If the kind of focus of the rainfall is slightly north or slightly south, then that will lead to a kind of less of a response in the Catherine River in terms of its height.